Okay, well, good morning, Ricardo. Thank you for participating with us and being a part of our Fresh Perspectives program. Um, for those of you that are watching, this is Ricardo Garcia. He's the owner of Back Unturned Brewing Company, which is located in downtown San Antonio off of Brooklyn Street. Um, Ricardo, you've been open for, is it almost a year now? Or a little less than a year?
In November, it'll be a year. So we've been open, I believe it's been 8 months.
8 months. So that's pretty exciting. 8 months you've been physically open, but I know that you've done a slew of things. You've been working on this idea for how long would you say? Like 5 years, a lifetime?
Lifetime in the making, but really focused on it about 5 years.
Okay, awesome. And so really, as part of all Fresh Perspectives programs, what we try to do is really get to the point of, what got you here? What have you learned? And, just kind of the story behind the business. And so I'd love to really get your story. Why, well, I guess let's just start with, how did you come up with the idea to brew beer? Where did that come from?
Well, that started about 10 years ago when we had our firstborn. I was looking for a hobby that I could do at home. While I was still at home I was always into like fishing and other things, outdoor activities. So I found something. I just bought it's called a Mr. Beer Kit, which is similar to like making a box cake. You just add some ingredients, pop it in the oven, so to speak, and then you have a cake. And then from there, I just became obsessed with it, but at that time, never considered it becoming a career. It was more of a really intense hobby. And then that's how I got into brewing. And then from there, I just became, I wouldn't say I know some pretty out there beer geeks, but close to a beer geek.
Okay. And I know this isn't your first business. What was your first business, or have you had more than one at this point?
When I was in Houston, when I lived in Houston for about a few years, I basically mowed yards and did landscape maintenance as a career to pay bills, and I learned a lot from there.
Okay. And I guess, so was entrepreneurship always a part of your calling, or, how did you really establish that? Because it's, it seems like you've kind of worked for yourself. And is it a matter of not fitting the mold of being in a corporate environment, or is that something you tried and you just decided you would, rather kind of run your own life? Or did you, have family that were entrepreneurs? How did that spark really take off?
Well, I've always had that entrepreneurial bug. I don't even know necessarily where it stems from. I know that growing up and being in school and academics and all that, I was one of the ones that was slow and had a lot of trouble in school from the academic standpoint. And so I knew at one point I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna. This is probably right before college. I was like, I'm going to run my own business. What do I need to go to college for? My mom's like, just go, give it a shot. If you fail, take it again. If you fail, I'll take it again. So then I ended up going to college and had my handful of jobs. And I always felt like I was the idea guy. Like, hey, we should do this or we should do that. I feel like we can make things better. And a lot of those, I got more frustrated that I didn't get a chance to implement any of that stuff. And then that's where it really started grabbing a hold of me wanting to do my own thing. Because after a while, I was like, well, screw it. If nobody else wants to try my ideas, I guess I'll just do my own thing. And so I went to college and got my undergraduate degree. But when I went to University of Houston to have an entrepreneurial program there, I was like, well, I'll just go do that. So I go and basically, I didn't even get into, no colleges would accept me. That's how bad my SATs and all that stuff were. So they basically said, if you go to community college and you get, at least these grades and your basic classes, we'll let you in. So I did that, got in. I was like, all right, well, let me go do this entrepreneurial program. And they're like, well, you have to apply. I was like, what? Oh my God, I did all this I didn't realize I had to apply for it and get interviewed. And fortunately, I got in. I did that, and then I started the landscape business. Did that for a few years, and then I thought that it would be good for me to follow the I don't know what you would call it, the professional life of being a designer or working in that realm. So I went and got a degree in landscape architecture and worked for design firms, and that's where I really got frustrated because some of these folks or a lot of folks are just stuck in their old ways. They're not willing to try new things. So, and then from there, that's pretty much when I started brewing beer, and I've had attempted a lot of things. From the age of 15 to the age of 30, I had at least 15 different jobs. So I was the one that had the bad attitude, and I'd go get a job and I'd quit and bounce around. And so when I came up with this idea to do this, my wife was like, if you do this, you have to make it happen. I'm tired of you bouncing around so much. So that's where, that's kind of the gist of the entrepreneurial part of it. Also, my parents, when we all immigrated from South America, they had a couple of their own things. They had a restaurant at one point with some partners, and that didn't work out. And my dad had done some different things, so I got to watch that happen. So that also sparks a lot of interest in me.
That's pretty exciting. No, that definitely answers the question. Like I love to hear the journey and just kind of the vigor behind what you've done to achieve the dreams that you had. And so you brought up your wife telling you that if you were going to do it, you had to stick with it. So this isn't one that we always get to ask, because most people, if they are married, sometimes their wife or spouse, husband has to be, is also involved somehow in the business. And so I guess, what is it like to have that support?
Support.
It's tough.
She's been very supportive from the beginning. That I would say for like the first major part of it, she just let me do my thing basically. And I know at one point, she's just like, okay, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was, you've got 1 year to make it happen. If not, you need to move on to something else. And that was like my oh shit moment, where I was like, oh crap, where it definitely lit the fire even more. So I pushed even harder. And then now she helps a lot on, like, she helps run payroll. She helps do all types of behind the scenes things. And then she understands that this isn't a normal job. So I still work a lot. So not being home very much. And so she's been very, very supportive.
That's awesome. So, kind of fast forward, now you're sort of in I guess like a brew pub like setting. You have a very gorgeous space. You've really, I think your idea is scaled up and down until you finally built it out. And so, how did you come from, hey, I want to make beer, to, hey, I want to make beer and pizza and wings and everything like that? How did you even realize that you wanted to make it a business and not just enjoy the hobby?
Well, definitely it's one of those. I started I've done a lot of personal development training. So that's if you're familiar with like the Tony Robbins of the world, companies like that. So I went through I invested a lot of time and money in myself doing that, and that's where I discovered for myself, if I'm going to do something, I might as well do something that I love doing. So that's why I was like, you know what? Because I would always hear, well, you can't always have your cake and eat it too, which still doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, if you have cake, why can't you eat it? So, so it would always be like, well, you got to find the job that pays the bills. You can't necessarily just go do whatever you want and, make money at it. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna give it a shot anyway. So that's where that stems from. And then as far as making it into a business and not just like going and working at a brewery, it was, there's an entrepreneurial bug for sure. And a lot of times I'm, at least for myself, what I choose to believe in myself is like, I'll go places and see people do things or companies do things. And I'm like, you know what, that's cool. But I bet I could do it better. So that's where I got into really wanting to do my own thing, because I felt like I could just do it better. I don't know how else to explain that. And then, hang on, I lost track a little bit. So the main question was like making it into a business, right?
Yes.
So, and then so when I came up with the idea, at first the idea was to make it a production brewery. So basically where we just make a lot of beer and distribute it to stores and restaurants and bars. And that was the idea. But the more and more I've done a lot of volunteering in breweries where I would go around and they would just let me help and learn. And I would ask questions. And one of the most common answers that I would get is like, man, if I could do it all over again, I would just do a brew pub. And I kept hearing that regularly. So I was like, well, man, that's where I was like, okay, I had my pride, right? Where I wanted this big ass brewery and we're going to have this big old brewing system. And I was going to eventually be the big boy on the block. And I said, you know what? Let me set that aside. I feel like these guys they're saying something. They're saying that for a reason. Just because the margins are so much lower in distribution, and it works when you have a pretty good market share and you can sell so much of it. So that's where I finally transitioned to doing a brew pub. And then I found a gentleman out in Colorado. He's owned, or he's had 8 different like brew pubs that he's started and sold off, and some of them are still open under different owners. And he teaches his own business model. So I went and did training with him, and he teaches. He basically is like, if you're gonna have a brewery or a brew pub, you've got to have food with it. So he does the whole pizza model, and for years we were making our own pizza at home. So it just, a lot of things seemed to line up, and that's how I ended up really pushing hard with this one. But out of the 5 years, I would say the first 3 years were, I'm going to open a production brewery, and then the last couple, it transitioned into actually pursuing the brew pub route.
I got you. So in terms of really getting to the idea, in terms of finally getting to the idea, a restaurant in general, a brewery in general and restaurant, both of these things are extremely complicated things to run. They're expensive to run. Once after this question, I'll let Taylor jump in and ask questions. So how did you find the funding? This is something that I think so many people are struggling with as they figure out their ideas. And did you have did you respond to one of those emails from the African Prince, or?
So we are an African-owned brewery. No, I'm just kidding. So as far as funding goes, that was someone asked me, what's been the hardest thing? I said, you know what? After everything that I've been through, I wouldn't say any of it was necessarily hard. It just seemed hard because I didn't know how to do it. But once you go through it, you're like, oh, that's not so bad. But in the moment, it's just hard in the moment. So the one thing I've learned going through personal development and doing this, and what I tell people, and they're always looking for like, well, who'd you talk to and where'd you get it from? And they're looking for like, go talk to these people, right? The one thing I've learned is if you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen. And if you don't, you'll just make excuses. And that is so true. And then from there, so the first 3 years, I was going to raise $3 million to open up a brewery. And I would speak to investors, and they wouldn't necessarily laugh at me, but I could feel it. They're like, oh my God, this guy has no restaurant experience. He's got no brewery experience. He's got no collateral. Like, he's just way too high risk. So that's where I eventually, I would talk to people. They're like, dude, just scale it back. Make it, do proof of concept, scale it back, make it smaller. So finally it went from the $3 million deal to a $500,000 deal. And I feel what helped was, in those 5 years, there's people watching, and I didn't necessarily realize they were watching me, but they were just watching me do my thing. And I think after several years, they're like, man, this guy is like, he's not giving up. And as I got closer and closer to it, made contacts. One thing that does help a lot is I always recommend doing what you can to have good credit. So I pulled out a lot of personal loans and credit cards that I know there's a lot of people that can't get. So that helped a lot, because then I could show investors, hey, look, I pulled all those loans out, made a bunch of cash advances, and I put that money in the bank, and I'm like, here, I have this cash. So that helps. And then the other thing was, over the years, when these people saw that I didn't give up, and then with time, like, especially with you guys, Launch SA and all that, helping prepare me, that's, I would say, is it Venture Challenge where we do the business pitch, right?
Yeah.
That definitely helped me the most in the very end. I would sit down and talk with people, but things didn't jive. And then once I went through that, then it was like, oh, okay, well, it was a lot easier there. And then I came across the landlord and met with him. And when he said yes, I went, all the people that I had been talking to say, hey, this is what I found. What do you guys think? And they're like, oh yeah, let's do it. So a lot of money came in within a couple of months, but that was like 3 or 4 years of working on that, meeting people. And I just learned that and for myself, I wanted it bad enough that I just didn't give up. I just, a year went by, 2 years went by. I felt like I just kept falling on my face. And I like what someone said to me is, well, at least you're falling forward. And I was like, oh gosh, okay. So, but yeah, that's as far as the money thing goes, that is the most challenging when you don't have the credibility behind you. Like I just didn't. But I just, no after no after no, I kept telling myself, these people don't know me, and I know what I'm capable of, but I don't know. And I just knew that in my gut, I was like, this has got to work. I feel like this will work. So it's a long answer. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. And one last question before I pass it over to Taylor for some better, fresh perspectives. So I know one of the tactics that you use, which I don't know if you ever meant it to be a tactic per se, but in getting yourself out there to meet potential investors and what have you, and also being in an industry where it's really hard to sort of do proof of concept, like sell your beer before you can, before you're in like a physical location. Can you talk a little bit about your free beer? Was it Free Beer Thursday?
Yeah, it was Free Beer Thursdays, and I started them off, I believe back in 2012, 13. So I did them for not 2012, 2013. I started that back in like 2015, 2016. So I did them for about 3 or 4 years. So the first Thursday of every month was just come over, drink free beer, tell me what you think. And it was more so like I was brewing, and it was a combination of things. Let me move through beer so I can brew more, because I don't know, I couldn't possibly drink all that, and I didn't want to just dump it down the drain. And then also, what do people think? So, the coolest thing out of that is I actually ended up with, I would say it's 1, 2, 3, 4 investors out of that, and this is where there's a lot of times that I would do something and it could seem so small, so insignificant, that I'm like, man, is this even worth doing? And I talked to my wife, and she's like, well, is it gonna hurt you? I was like, no, okay, I'm just kind of being lazy. I'll just do it, or is it worth the time? I was promoting these through like social media, like, hey, come over and drink free beer. I mean, the first time I did it, I think I had one person come over, and then by the end of it, we would average anywhere from 30 to 50 people once a month. But that took 3 years to build. And so I would do like the Facebook ad, and I would, for like 10 or 20 bucks, promote it. And I had people that would show up, and I give them so much credit, because they're like, they would pull up, and you could see them get out of their car, and they're like, we're looking for the free beer thing. I'm like, yeah, that's us. And which just seems so weird to me. It's like, I don't know if I would go to somebody's house that I didn't know and like walk up to the garage and like, hey, we're here for the free beer thing. Because, there are some really great home brewers out there, and I would say most of them are not. The beer's okay. You're just like, oh, okay. It's just kind of like a fun camaraderie thing. But is the beer great? Not so much. So I didn't know what they were expecting. And there was a couple that came. I got to know them. They kept coming back, and then they invited some of they're part of a big running club. So they invited some other runners, and it turned into where I became friends with one of them. And out of those, couple of the runners invested. And at the time when I was like, man, do I even spend 20 bucks on this? Is it worth it? I ended up raising about $90,000 through doing that, unintentionally. Like I didn't realize that would ever happen. But one group invested 50, and then another one did 20, and then there was a couple other guys that did 10, and it was quite amazing. So that was really cool. But of course, that's the 3 or 4 years in doing that, because there was times that I would do it and you'd only have like 2 or 3 people show up, and I'm like, why am I even doing this? It's like, I don't know. I just felt stupid doing it. But
I think that's unintentional, right? But super exciting to see something like that kind of come together. And I love it. So I'm going to pass it over to Taylor, who you only briefly just met at the beginning of this. And because we have a relationship, obviously, Ricardo, it's much easier for me to kind of figure out what questions to ask. And maybe I'm overlooking some stuff. So this is really an opportunity for Taylor, who has no connection to you really, to get into who you are and ideally bring forth something that I wouldn't have thought of because I know you. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Taylor.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. I guess I'll start off with what unexpected challenges did you face when you started the process of creating your business?
Definitely number one is the business plan. And it's weird to say because I did my undergraduate degree in it was marketing and entrepreneurship, and we did a business plan and all of that. But there's so many templates out there, and it's trying to figure out what people want to hear or see or read. So there was that. So I don't know how many times I revised that thing and changed that thing. And then the other thing was definitely raising the money, because I can see from someone else's perspective, looking at me and like, okay, so what's his credibility? What experience does he have? So that was in the beginning the most challenging thing was establishing some form of credibility. But your question was specifically in like starting the business, right?
Right. Like, obviously there's going to be like challenges, but was there any like unexpected challenge that you were faced with that you weren't like expecting would be a challenge?
No, I really thought raising money would be a lot easier. So that was definitely unexpected, yeah, especially when you have so many friends and family. Because I had a couple of buddies that were, man, when are you gonna open your brewery? That's when it was still it was just a hobby. When are you gonna open a brewery? But it turned into, when are we gonna open a brewery? So finally, I'm like, hey guys, I'm ready. Let's do this thing. They're like, I have a job. I'm like, so do I. So I totally did not expect them to flake out on me. And then also finding a location took a while. That took, I would say, about 1.5 to 2 years of looking, just because I would meet with landlords and you'd meet with them and it's the same questions and they would never say no right off the bat, but they would be like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we'll give you a call, we'll email you, and then you email them, call them, and they don't ever respond, and it became very frustrating.
It's like the cold shoulder. Yeah, I bet that was tough. So how did you kind of like navigate that? Like, how did you meet those challenges?
Oh man, the easiest way to explain it is just sticking with it. I mean, there was definitely days that I felt so discouraged. I was, it was one of those like, man, is this ever going to happen? Especially, it was right around the time I found the location. I was seriously considering joining the military reserves, especially because I had a degree and everything, so I could go in and go into officers training. And I'm like, okay, well, at least I feel like I have some sense of purpose outside of like a regular job.
Right.
And I had someone email me. Like I met a woman through, pretty sure it was Craigslist, that said, oh, I help people find locations for restaurants. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, this is what I'm looking for. And she emailed me this spot. And, met with him and he said yes. But that was the other thing that, I guess my point is, like, as far as unexpected, like, I didn't, like, you hear people talk about it, like being discouraged, but man,
it's a different thing to actually be discouraged. Yeah.
Right. And go through it. And, when you hear even me, I'm sure, saying it to somebody else, it's like, man, just stick with it. You can do it. Right. And it's just like, oh, okay, sure. Wow. Let's do it. And then you get into it and you're like, oh my God, why am I even doing this? So those are definitely in the opening process, the unexpected things. And then also when you start really getting into working with others, especially contractors, that was challenging. Yeah. When they say they're going to do something and then they don't do it. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for like being honest about it. I think it's important for the people watching to not only like hear the awesome like hard work stuff, but also like the grind whenever it's hard to do the grind, because that's a very real part of starting a business. So what's different about like the restaurant business? Like, how is that different from your previous business? Like the business model, your philosophy, has anything had to change?
I mean, it's so different that when I was doing landscape, it was just myself, and then I had a guy that would help me a few days a week, and we were just out there mowing yards and planting plants and putting mulch down, that type of stuff. and then like smaller landscape projects. Now doing this is, thank God I'm in the air conditioning. That I'm spoiled with. Love that, especially right now. But it's a lot different. There's, we've got about, I believe we're up to about 18 people now here. So working with so many people, there's that, and then there's you have the restaurant side of things, and then you have the brewing side of things, which are almost like two different businesses in one. So that's a lot different. But a lot of things are still so similar. I guess what's the most different is the people aspect. There's just a lot of folks to work with, but what's the same is definitely focusing on cash flow. Because just because there may be $80,000 coming in this month, it doesn't necessarily mean we're cash flow positive and that the bank account isn't, slowly decreasing each month. So,
yeah.
I guess that's the other thing. It's much bigger numbers than what I've ever been used to. So I've always told, watching these very what I call successful people and who I follow, and one guy's like, for me, I used to have $100 problems. He's like, I want to grow it to where I have $1 million problems. And now I'm in the part where it's like we have, the $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 problems, which is it's a lot of money, but it's still like I'm glad to go through it, but at the same time, it's still scary.
Yeah, I bet. So how have you been involved with like the San Antonio small business community?
I actually haven't been much involved lately. In the beginning, I was much more involved before we opened, just because I had more time to like go to events and do all that. And now, as far as being involved, the most I've done is like just being part of like the social media groups and like chats and like helping each other out. I think if anything, as breweries, we've helped each other out. There's like myself and a few other ones that I've really like, hey, what do you do for this? Or what do you do for that? Or can I borrow basically a cup of sugar? There's that. And then there's lately with the shutdowns for bars here in Texas, like we joined I forget what it's called, the Texas Nightclub and Bar Alliance, the TNBA. And, we didn't have to join that. I didn't have to spend $300 to join that, but I knew that they were going to like push for, now they're fighting a lawsuit against Governor Abbott and everything to get bars open. But, so, I mean, that's the most that I've been involved lately. But my goal eventually is to have different folks take over certain roles that I do here. That way I can be more of that helping hand in the community.
Right. Like be a little bit more involved. Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess my next question has a little bit more to do with like COVID and advertising. Like, how's your business been reacting with like COVID? Have you had to switch the way that you advertise? Because a lot of people don't know which businesses are open or closed right now. So have you seen that issue with your clientele?
No, definitely. As far as with COVID in the very beginning, when the first shutdown happened, I mean, we went from basically being a restaurant where people could come in and dine in we went to curbside, and people couldn't find toilet paper and eggs. So we had like a very small stock of groceries for people. Never thought I'd be selling toilet paper and eggs on the side of the street, but that's what we were doing for first couple of weeks until people could find that stuff again. And then as far as like knowing what's open, what's not open, fortunately, we were open for about, what was that, December, January, February, about 3 months before it happened. So we gained a good following. So we had enough people that helped keep us afloat throughout that part of it. And now with being open, we've had to like really go through like the Googles and the Yelps and what else? To update our hours. And there for a while, we could not change it on Google that said that we were open. One of the guys here figured out that we had to change our listing from a brew pub to a restaurant so that it would allow us to say that we were open. Because it just would not change. I mean, so there's been some weird, I don't know. I wouldn't call it conspiracy theory, but why Google would even do that, I have no idea. But
yeah, like, so that makes sense. I know that one of the safe things for like consumers that I've been seeing is like, no matter what Google says, call just to make sure. Yeah, because Google's wrong for a lot of kind of, whenever you have that dual model of like brew pub and restaurant, I've seen it a couple of times that it's not totally accurate. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's kind of, it's frustrating because, you know, you can't necessarily update something, but then you get those calls like, hey, would you like to advertise with this? I'm like, why would I advertise with you if you can't even get my listing correct? So there's that. We definitely get a lot of phone calls. One thing that's helped us is we work with a social media influencer here in town. Her name is Amanda Spencer. She goes by SA Foodie on Instagram and Facebook. So
I've heard of her. Yeah.
She's been coming out once a month, and she'll do like a photo shoot, and she'll post it on her site. And we do a giveaway, like two $50 gift card giveaways. And each time we do that, we've gotten, I would say, there's people that come in because of that post, and specifically Instagram. Each time we do that, we gain about 1,000 followers each time we do that, and so that's helped a lot. And then also, the other thing that has helped us a lot is because we have a great product, like food wise and beer wise. We've gotten recognition through like KSAT, and like through David Elder with Elder Eats. So he's come out and put a little video together, and that helped a lot. And so I'll definitely say, as far as like how to advertise and how to do that, is number one, still focus on a good product. That way you get attention through that. And then also, man, just be willing to shift so fast, because the nice thing with us is we can adapt really fast. As to like, I can't imagine like being a large chain of restaurants like I don't know, like a Chili's or whatever they are, that when you get shut down, like then, you know, to be able to adapt it, you know, oh, well, let's talk to corporate and let's do this. And oh my God.
Right. Like the bureaucracy.
Right. Does that help?
Yeah. That answers my question really well. So I guess like moving forward with like that whole idea of being able to switch really quickly and being flexible, is there any advice that you would give to like new business owners or new entrepreneurs who want to get into the like restaurant or brew pub industry?
Yeah, I would. The first thing that comes to mind is definitely be humble. I know it's easy to become prideful and whatever it may be, whether it's the food, the service, or be humble and like thank all your guests, because they can really tell when you feel it. Like, it's really weird, especially with everything going on. When I see someone walk in, I'm like, oh, thank God. What else? As far as adapting, definitely. I mean, I don't like watch the news, but I keep an ear to the ground to like to kind of get a sense of what's going on. And right now, they're talking about, I don't know, I'm almost expecting another shutdown to happen. I hope and pray it doesn't. But if it does happen again, we're ready to go to adapt. And what I mean by adapt, like we'll run specials, and they're like off the cuff, like, man, like things are slow today. It's a slow start. What do we do? You know, it's like, and I like the way Carlos is my general manager, and Carlos, the way he puts it, he's like, so what would you drive out to that place for? Like, what would make you drive out there? And that's how we'll like run a special or price things. And from a business standpoint, like number wise, it doesn't always make the most sense, but at least it's driving consumers in. And then also staying relevant. Like, what can you do to stay relevant to, what people are looking for, what people are expecting? So that we adjust the menus. We started doing a brunch on Sundays. Now we're going to add it on to Saturdays starting in August. So if I could summarize the first few points, is definitely number one, be humble. Just thank your customers and be willing to go out there and how is everything? And thank you for coming. And then I think people really appreciate that, because most of the times people don't even know who I am. They just see some guy like working on stuff. And and not only with customers but also the employees, like, they know me here well enough that I'm willing to like, and I like sweep and go clean a bathroom or whatever it may be, because I don't ask anybody to do anything I'm not willing to do myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then also doing what you can to adapt as fast as possible to, what are people looking for from a pricing standpoint, from a product standpoint, to also like what can you do to stay relevant. I mean, we still did an SA Foodie post during the shutdown, if I remember correctly, just to help keep people coming. I mean, we may not be making as much of a profit margin, but at least it's covering, the rent and the light bills and all the debt payments that we have.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think that those are really, really important pieces of advice for someone to hear if they're thinking about going into this industry, or if they're like freshly starting into this industry. So those are all the questions that I have for you. Ryan, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, of course. So I really appreciate you kind of giving that insight, Ricardo. So now that you're responsible for 18 people, what does that feel like? I mean, did you, in your previous entrepreneurship endeavors, I know you said you worked with at least one other person. What does it feel like to be this person that's employing others? That's, not only building something for yourself, your family, in a sense, but then also giving opportunities to other people. Like, is it scary? Is it exciting? Is it both? Is it something completely different?
It's definitely all of the above. It's more than I imagine. There's one part of it where it's like seeing the payroll that goes out every 2 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, it just like, I knew that you look at the numbers and you do your Excel stuff and there's all that, but then when it comes down to it and you got to run payroll and you got $20,000 that comes out every 2 weeks, for me, I'm like, oh shit, that's a lot of money. And then like, okay, so what do we need to do to make sure that we still have enough revenue coming in to meet payroll and the rent and all that? There's that part of it, the financial aspect, and then there's the people part of it where they're looking to me, because it's a weird thing, because I don't see myself any different than them. Like when I'm talking to people outside of work, I say, hey, I'm going into work. That's just how I see it. I'm going into work. I'm gonna go do my job. I don't say I'm like going into my business or so I forget that they're looking to me for the words of affirmation, for giving them updates, for basically the leadership. So that's one thing I constantly have to remind myself, because when I'm out there, I almost see myself as like, I see myself as the same, like we're out there just doing our thing, but I don't realize until someone says something, and just the way they say it, you could tell they're like, oh man, that's the boss man. And I'm like, oh my God, quit calling me that, And there's that part of it. And then the other part of it that, especially with all the COVID stuff happening, is when we had to shut down, I was just like, oh my God, how many people am I going to have to lay off, or what's going to happen? And like, these people are depending on me for, their lives. So that's been pretty stressful. Meeting labor budget numbers and what do we need to do there to keep them employed or whatever it may be. And then I would say one of the coolest things though, out of that is also because Back Unturned Brewing Company, it's the dream I didn't turn my back on. So I always tell people, it's possible that I would say out of the 18 people, there's probably a good 3 to 5 people that want to go off and do their own thing. And I'm like, don't ever hesitate to ask me questions. I'm an open book. You can come in here. You can look at numbers. The only thing I won't show you is like people's pay, but I'll show you anything else. Like and we've had a couple of people take us up on that, and they really appreciate that. And then the other thing is, like, I know like the past couple of weeks we've been a little short on folks, especially like if someone's feeling sick. Then it's like, oh my God, okay, you just stay home for at least 10 days. We go by what the CDC recommends. And so we've been short a couple people, and just to not take the chances of, everything going on. And they're like, man, yeah, we've been working a lot. We've been we've been tired. And I said, and I was telling them, we have weekly meetings on Wednesday mornings, and I was telling them yesterday on our Wednesday morning, I said, for those of you that want to go do your own thing, like, I understand you feel like you've been working a lot, but multiply this by at least 2 to 3 times for you to do your own thing. I said, just keep that in mind, be aware of that, use that as a self-check to see if you really want to do this. It's a lot of work. So there's a lot of aspects that go to it, from financial aspect to, remembering that I'm in a leadership position, to these people are looking at me as an example of what they want to do in the future.
I think that's very candid, for sure. So, I mean, yeah, it can be a rewarding and difficult thing to be the employer. But it sounds like you have a pretty good head on you in terms of all that you've learned, all that you've done. I'm always inspired to see. I always talk about you as the person that everyone should be like, because you take advice and you actually do something with it, which I think is really important. A lot of people don't do that. In fact, I was just talking to some students from Trinity, and I mentioned you the other day. But one of the things that I think I hear a lot from you is that you've really pursued sort of this personal growth, personal development, leadership training, and otherwise. So I'm really curious, from your perspective, what do you feel has been the most important lessons you've learned from that? And or if there is a recommendation that you would give to people in terms of maybe, what quiz to take, what course to take, what development to pursue, what do you think it has benefited you?
Yeah, so with personal development, just like with a lot of things in life, the one thing that I remember hearing was the guy that had started the company. It's called Clemmer and Associates, and there are. Of course, I'm biased towards them because I kind of like Launch SA. Like, I went through you guys, and you guys helped me out a lot. Same thing with them. But they're called Clemmer and Associates, and the guy that had founded it, Brian Clemmer, he would would, watch his videos and watch things, and he would always say, if you're going to do personal development, remember you got to stick with it for at least 3 to 5 years for it to become second nature. So I said, oh, okay. So I basically have done it for over 5 years now, and it really does take 3 to 5 years for it to become second nature. And it's all about developing a level of self-awareness and how you think about things. And so as far as like a quiz or anything to go, I mean, I would definitely look for companies out there that do something like this. There's Clemmer and Associates. Tony Robbins does his thing. And going through this, I've learned to take advice from people that have what I want. So if I'm going to go meet with a financial advisor and they're like, well, we recommend you do this, this, and that. And then that's where I'm like, well, show me your personal financials. I want to make sure that whatever you're telling me lines up with what you do. So I've learned that as well, so that I'll take advice from people that have what I want. And the folks that own and run Clemmer Associates definitely walk the talk. And like through them, I think there's like 4 or 5 different trainings that you go through that start from one level and you go up in levels. And I think on average, if you did them all back to back, you could probably do it in 1.5 to 2 years, but I believe it took me 2.5, something like that. And just to make it as simple as possible, when I did the first training, that's where I learned that I wanted to do this, because it was like, I remember hearing the question, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I was like, man, I'd open a brewery. And they're like, well, why aren't you doing that? I'm like, well, that's stupid. I need a real job. And then I remember them asking, well, who says it's not a real job? And I just remember thinking, well, shit, I guess me. Because I remember growing up, what I grew up around was like, in order for you to get a really good job, you have to go to school and you got to go get educated and you got to go do this so you can go get a really good job so you can, pay your bills in life and all that stuff. So, of course, that wasn't like the school route. So it wasn't even registering to me. So that's how my personal development journey started. And I highly, highly recommend it. Fast track your life. Like, I think what I've done is probably, like, if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't say like I would never have done this. Instead of like, I'm 39 now, I would probably be like close to 50 or 55 doing this instead of 39. If I had started this years ago, I would be 29 instead of 39. So does that help?
No, absolutely. That's I think that's really relevant information for those that are looking for that structured avenue to really understand themselves. So no, I really appreciate it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm missing. I feel like I've really gotten a lot of valuable information in your time. I really appreciate you giving it so generously to us. Taylor, do you have any other questions that you'd like to ask?
I'm good. Yeah, I think anything that I would have asked has already been answered. You've been awesome at giving really thorough answers.
Oh, no, yeah, for sure. And then, the way I always like to leave it is, for me, if you have like a specific dream in your heart, and for me, it's like if I feel like God put that dream there, it's totally there for you to go out and achieve and grab. And it's all set up for you. It's just a matter of going out. Number one, for me, one of the toughest things was asking for help. So I used to really suck at asking for help. I'm getting better. I've gotten a lot better. And then also just, working for it, not being afraid to work. And then there's that. So I would definitely, for those people that want to do this, that they feel like this is something that's in their heart and that they really want to do, become obsessed about it. Like, I think about this thing it doesn't ever end, and I would do it all over again. It's totally worth it. So if people are curious, like, man, is it really worth it? For me, it is. And I would definitely say just stick with it. Like for you, especially with you guys over at Launch SA, reach out to them. I was talking to one of the employees here yesterday that was asking about her wanting to do her own thing, and I gave her y'all's contact information, and so it's there's that part of it as far as what's in your heart, and then also just leading into. I want to thank you guys for always being so helpful and helping me get where I've been able to get. So I appreciate it.
And we really appreciate you, Ricardo. You're not only an inspiration to us, but ideally those that watch this are going to be inspired as well. In fact, somebody told me they were incredibly inspired by you for the last time that they heard you spoke. And I thought that was really cool too,
Okay.
in Break Fast and Launch. So your story is really great. And so I really appreciate you spending the time and sharing it with us again. And yeah, no, I appreciate you being on this, I guess you could say, episode of Fresh Perspective. So thank you. And I hope that business continues on an upward trend for you. And I hope that you find the ability to continue to grow personally, professionally, and otherwise.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And vice versa. Appreciate it.
Yeah.